Is Dave, is,
I'm just trying to think, like, if you go to McDonald's, let's say you go in person and get that tray you get.
Here you go. You're welcome.
all right, being 6 o'clock, I'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
An educational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors will be held at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, at 6 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you, and I'd like to request everyone please silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate as to not be an interruption to the meeting, and I thank you for your compliance. We'll move on to roll call, and I'd ask everyone to please sign in.
Matt Boots here.
Thank you, Mr. Boots. All right, thank you. And I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have with us this evening, including the viewing audience, and thank you for your interest in county government. We'll move on to 15-minute public comment. I'd like to announce that when individuals are brought to the front and given the 3 minutes to public comment, that they are to address all of their comments to the chair. So we have two people that have signed up. Sean Dumas. Sean, please come up to the microphone, and you'll be given 3 minutes to provide your comments. I'll give you a notice when we're reaching 30 seconds, and then again at 10 seconds.
Hello, my name is Sean Dumais. I previously served as a member of the Village of Cronawetter Board as well as the Utility Committee for the village. Today I wish to address Agenda Item 4 Alpha, Resolution Number R2525. The County Road Department is proposing to construct a new facility to support the road crews, and I want to emphasize my full support for their need to improve facilities. However, the specific proposal to build this facility within the Village of Cronawetter raises several concerns that I believe the body should hear before voting. It is important to note that this proposal has not been presented to any committee or the board of Cronawetter prior to it being put on tonight's agenda. This is the first time that many of the Cronawetter residents, as well as myself, have learned of it. While there are some generic inquiries made via email from the County Transportation Board to village staff regarding our capacity to handle approximately 800,000 to 1 million gallons of water per year, the context was minimal. Staff communicated that our water department could theoretically support this demand. However, the assessment they gave did not consider the additional load from a residential development currently going through the approval process in Cronawetter. And moreover, the bulk of the required water usage for the county's proposal would occur within a narrow window time frame due to it being used for brining operations, which is seasonal. Having served on the utility committee, I possess a very good understanding of our system's capacities based on a year-long engineering study that was done while I was on the committee. Unfortunately, our current infrastructure cannot handle such a significant increase in demand without incurring substantial costs for upgrades that our village simply cannot afford. Over the past decade, our water system has deteriorated significantly, creeping ever closer to the limits due to mismanagement and poor rates. We are already taking on additional costs for necessary upgrades currently. To accommodate the county's proposed usage, we would require exponentially more upgrades, which may include a new well and a tower, which would result in millions of dollars in expenses for the utility customers. Considering that we have just undergone a rate increase that barely covers our current costs, securing funding for an extensive infrastructure upgrade would be necessitate a full case review with the Public Service Commission, which is lengthy and a complex process and would take very long. While alternative options may be presented to everyone here, such as connecting to Rothschild's water supply, it is crucial to remember that the village has already voted against that option due to concerns over PFAS and Rothschild's water supply. There are many additional factors I can't fully address in my 3-minute allotment, so I will conclude by respectfully urging the body to vote against Resolution 2525,
30 seconds.
which proposes purchasing land in the village of Cronawetter at an amount exceeding fair market value in hopes that the village will later approve the project. I feel we are putting the cart before the horse and a more prudent step would have been to present this proposal to the village for preliminary review and equip them with the accurate data on water usage
10
to assist
seconds.
our capabilities. I thank you very much.
Thank you. We also have Guy Friedel. Guy, please.
Guy Friedel, 2240 Ruby Drive, Chronoware.
I think you shut it off.
It needs to be green.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Guy Friedel. I live at 2240 Ruby Drive, Chronowetter. I'm here to give public comment regarding Resolution 2525. I've lived my whole life based upon two lessons I learned from my parents. Don't make money the most important object in your life, and try to be fair, try to act with integrity, and engage in fair dealing. I think those principles apply to this situation. The resolution before the board would create a terrible one-sided situation, which would greatly benefit the city of Wausau by allowing the existing county highway site on West Street to be redeveloped and to generate more tax base. On the other hand, the village of Chronowetter would lose the opportunity for any development on the site for the new highway department, for any new tax base, and the village would receive $0 in taxes from this property. In addition, we'd have the great pleasure of maintaining the most costly single road we have in our village, Old Highway 51. We don't need more heavy truck traffic, and we certainly don't need heavy truck traffic generated from an entity that's not paying a dime of taxes to our community. The village of Chronowetter has had a comprehensive plan and a strategic plan for a long time. They identified the Old Highway 51 corridor as a prime location for commercial and industrial development. Randy Pfeifferich, Wausau's current community director, was involved in developing both of those plans. He knew about them. He still knows about them. So the village of Chronowetter, our taxpayers pay over $3 million a year to Marathon County. We don't have a library. We don't have much in the way of a sheriff's department. We don't need one because we have our own police department. We pay wheel taxes to the county. We pay sales taxes to the county. And for this, we're going to get nothing from the county for a facility that's going to cost the county $100 million, from what I understand. I would suggest that you apply those two principles, or those principles that I mentioned, to approach the village and have a discussion with the village board. I don't have any authority
30
to
seconds.
even make a proposal, but I'd like you to propose a payment in lieu of taxes. I think it would be fair. I think it would be returning to Chronowetter less than 1/6 of the amount that the village pays in taxes alone every year. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other individuals who signed up for public comment, we'll move on to item 8, educational presentations, and under item 8A, standing committee chairs or designees. Any announcements by standing committee chairs or designees? Okay, we will move on, and without objection, we will hold off on the presentation on item 8B. We're waiting to hear back. Mr. Fawcett was planning on attending. We haven't heard whether or not something has come up that he was not going to be attending. We'll take that up without objection from the board at the end of the meeting. If he's not here, we'll still proceed with discussing it. We'll move on to review and discussion on voting items for the meeting, the ordinances under 9A1, Town of Eau Plaine rezone. Zafai Family Irrevocable Trust, item O1425. Any questions? All right, moving on, item 9A2, the Town of Frankfurt rezone. Christopher Schumacher for Marcus and Sarah Nolt. Ordinance 15-25. Any questions? Okay, moving on to item 9A3, Town of Green Valley rezone, Brandon Lear and Brass Properties, ordinance 16-25. Any questions? Okay, moving on to item 9A4, the Town of Hall rezone, Daniel Weaver, ordinance 0-17-25. Any questions? All right, moving on to item 9A5, Town of rezone, Tim Vreeland for Mark and Katie Lobb, ordinance 0-18-25. Any questions? All right, moving on to 9B, resolutions, either 9B1, Environmental Resources Committee, 9B1A, the Town of Ringgold Zoning Ordinance Amendment, Solar Systems and Wind Energy Systems Ordinance, Resolution 21-25. Any questions? Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I am in favor of townships putting these health and safety ordinances in place to protect the people of these townships. I am not in support of the edits that were proposed for this ordinance in Ringgold. The PSC's regulations are outdated. These regulations were written when the turbines were only at a maximum height of about 300 feet. Current turbines being installed are from a range of 600 to 900 feet in height. The average is about 700 feet. In the western towns, this is what they are pushing to install. For example, the setback regulations for these turbines size is about 1,250 feet from a dwelling. Imagine having a 700-foot turbine installed only 1,250 feet from your house. The ear-piercing infrasound from these turbines and the light flicker, etc., makes these homes inhabitable. In many cases, people have outright abandoned their homes because they couldn't live with the nightmare anymore. From what I've read in this ordinance, I find it looks like they have abided by the PSC regulations. They have actually listed in many of the areas of the ordinance, the PSC regulations. By changing the wording from required to recommend, they are softening their ability to protect the health and safety of the people of this town. I support the protection of health and safety of the residents, which is given to the governing bodies under the state statute of 66.0401. I also believe in the protection of the environment, wildlife, saving our roads, and protecting the precious farmland. Again, I'm in favor of these health and safety ordinance for townships, but these edits really weaken the power of the town, so I will be voting no on these edits. My recommendation to the county board is to get a resolution to this PSC to actually get updated for the regulations that would apply to the current size of industrial wind turbines. Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think this would be a good opportunity to give the rest of the county board some background concerning the Town of Ringgold ordinance. The Town of Ringgold brought this ordinance to us, I think 2 months ago, and we had some concerns about the legality of the ordinance because, as was mentioned previously, local governments can regulate wind and solar. They have broader latitude to regulate when it's under 100 megawatts. When it is above 100 megawatts, they can still regulate, but it must be in strict conformance with PSC 128. We might not like what's in PSC 128, but it is the law to follow it. That being said, we had a dialogue with Ringel. We had a dialogue with the company that assisted with Ringel's drafting of this ordinance. They received our feedback. Our corporation counsel worked with their attorneys, and they crafted this so that both the town of Ringel and the county are confident in putting this ordinance in front of this board. I don't think that we should tell Ringel what to do, because Ringel is supportive of this. In addition to that, I think we should follow our legal counsel in following the law and support this. I do not believe what we should do is use the town of Ringel's ordinance as a way to litigate a larger issue that's playing out right now in local government. So I would urge you all to support this ordinance on Tuesday. Thank you.
Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate both of the comments from Supervisor Langenhahn and Supervisor Sandelsky. I do think that on one hand, we should be supporting the town of Ringel and how they wish to move forward with this. At the same time, I think we really need to consider as a county what on earth we are doing when it comes to large solar and wind industrial complexes in our county. So we can sit here and we can say we're going to follow the state, or we can sit here and say we are not going to impose our power upon a local community. But I really think we need to start thinking about how we are going to consider what we're doing for our county citizens when it comes to large industrial complexes trying to impose their will upon us when it has nothing to do with energy or climate or anything other than these companies coming in here and getting credits and money. That's all. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Sandelsky, please.
So I just got one question, a clarification. So are we voting on the actual ordinance, or are we voting on the edits? Is the ordinance already in place?
I'll have Corp Counsel address the question.
Sure. So this board will be voting on the ordinance. The ordinance itself requires county board approval. So the edits that are reflected are part of the ordinance as currently written, but it needs final county board approval at this point. So it's all one package. We're not voting on the edits separately. We're voting on the ordinance as a whole.
Thank you.
Supervisor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if you take farmland that's growing crops for human consumption and you turn it into a solar or wind, is this against our farmland preservation that is in our comprehensive plan as well as the information that we passed within the last year?
Supervisor Langenhahn, please.
I don't have the answer to that question. I'm happy to have that discussion, but again, I caution this board from litigating a larger issue, okay? We're not here to debate whether or not it's good to have wind and solar in this county. That is a separate discussion that we have had in the past, and I'm sure we are going to have it again. What we are looking at is the ordinance that is in front of us from the town of Ringel, okay? I think we owe them some respect in looking at that ordinance and, following their wishes. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
I have a follow-up, please.
Go ahead.
I do think that it is important, or at least we've been told that it's important that we follow our comprehensive plan. We did pass a farmland preservation that said we do not want to convert farmland to housing developments, so I don't see the difference.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All right. Moving on to item 9B2, Extension Education Economic Development Committee, a resolution authorizing a letter of support for Domtar to utilize in pursuing funding for the Rothschild Dam Modernization Program. Now, That ties back to the educational presentation from Mr. Fawcett. Mr. Fawcett has contacted staff, and he had a family emergency, so he won't be able to present, but Administrator Leonard will preside and provide the information.
This will be the shortest presentation you probably ever hear from me. I will send you an email after today's meeting, essentially linking to the Extension Education Economic Development Committee meeting from April 3rd at 3 p.m., where Mr. Fawcett did appear and provide that presentation. The slides are the same. The resolution in your packet is a resolution that essentially would be an authorization by the board of a letter of support for one purpose is the congressionally directed spending application that Rothschild, the Village of Rothschild, is submitting on Domtar's behalf for the Rothschild Dam Modernization Project, as well as a second, more general letter that Domtar has requested for its efforts to seek support from other funding institutions or other funding opportunities. So that's the resolution in your packet. If you were looking for more from me, I sincerely apologize, but I'll send that link.
Any other questions on the item? All right, moving on. A resolution to accept a furniture donation for the Regional Forensic Science Center, Resolution 23-25. All right, moving on to item 9B, 3B, a resolution to approve expenditures to repair the North Courthouse Elevator, Resolution 24-25. Any questions? Administrator Leonard, please.
Sure. So and I think I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Committee Chair Robinson. Chris is here. This is an item that HR Finance is going to be taking up at its next meeting. Essentially, it's a couple of different funding options to move forward with the project, but that is going to be considered by HR Finance at its next meeting. The idea being we wanted to get the information in front of you so you could at least see it, ask any questions. The short story, we need to fix an elevator. The bigger question is how do you want to pay for it? But that will be discussed at HR Finance next week.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, we'll move on then to, from the Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee and Infrastructure Committee, a resolution authorizing the purchase of property for Marathon County Highway Facilities, Resolution 25-25. Any discussion? Supervisor Wilhelm, please.
Thank you, Chair. After receiving some information, I do have a question of why we haven't been in contact with the Village of Cronewater.
And we're going to start with a presentation by the Highway Commissioner, Mr. Griesbach.
Thank you. So I'm back again. We have had conversations with the village. We had conversations with the previous village president. We've had conversations with the zoning department, and I've had conversations with the utility department. So I've heard a couple of comments, and I'll address a few of them before I actually get into the presentation. Excuse me. One is about the water. So if we use 800,000 gallons a year, last year we used less than that down here. So I did ask a question about 800 to 900,000 gallons of water. If you think about it, a typical home uses about 50 gallons of water per person per day. So you're looking at that 200 gallons of water a day. 4 people, you're up to 200 gallons a day. Times 365, you're at 73,000 gallons of water a year for a typical ranch home with 4 people in. If you do the math, if we're using 800,000 gallons of water, that's less than 11 homes a year that we're using the water for. So I think the water issue might be, I don't have the ins and outs of Corona Water's utility, but that's what it equals out to be. And also remember, if you have that home, all of that water is going back into the sanitary sewer system, where the majority of this water is not going back into the sanitary sewer system. So it's a lot of times you think it's an equal number, the usage of the water and the sanitary, it's not an equal use at all. Like I said, most of that water is being used for brine. As far as the traffic impact, right now, we're at a crazy intersection. We have so many conflict points at our existing location. So we did talk to an engineering firm, JT Engineering, to give us a traffic memo. They reviewed it. They see no maximum traffic impacts. They're very minimal out there. We don't generate much traffic, okay? Peak time in the summer, we'll have probably 55 to 60 people working out of that facility because we closed down a couple other facilities. They come out of there. So we have 60 people pulling in the morning, 60 people pulling out at the end of the day. During the day, they get in their trucks. I'm not talking wintertime, I'm not talking summer now. There's 3 or 4 people in the trucks. So time they go out in the morning, come back at the end of the day. And our vendors, we figuring we have 250 tops vehicles coming and entering that facility a day. Now that site is zone commercial, so it's zoned first, it's zone B3. A B3 would allow a gas station. So if a Quick Trip came in there, you're probably looking at 1,500 to 3,000 cars a day coming in there. If you had a fast food place, they figure those numbers are between 500 to 1,200 vehicles a day. A retail, 500 to 1,500. And a health and fitness, go right next to the McDonald's, you can put health and fitness, 500 to 2,000 cars a day. So now each one of those sites, let's say a Quick Trip, I'm not sure exactly the footprint, but maybe 5 acres. So you could have a Quick Trip there, you could have a McDonald's, and you could have your health fitness place all in there, and you could have all those numbers. So again, when we're generating 200 to 250 cars a day in and out of there, the numbers are very minimal, the impact of that road. In the winter, if it is snowing, we're gonna be going out, probably most times, the snow comes, we're going out at 4 in the morning, so the impact should be very minimal even at that point. We run probably about, we'll be running about 27, 28 vehicles out of that shop. So during the winter, traffic is less, and we're coming in and out maybe a few times a day. So the traffic, I don't feel is going to be a major issue there. So with the presentation itself, I'm just going to kind of go real fast over our existing land, things that we have out there. So it's been brought up, our West Side Master Plan that's been on the book since the early 2000s talked about redevelopment of that land as park expansion. Well, it's been brought forward by a few board members about what are other options. So we engaged the services of Noah Phillips Appraisal to come and look at it and analyze the site. So he gave us different ideas and different options that at some point I feel this board needs to sit down and decide of really what do we want to do with that parcel of land? Do we want to stick with the original master plan that we had, the West Side Master Plan back in the early 2000s, or is it time to relook at that and look at possible development of it? So we contacted Mr. Phillips and he gave us a couple different options. He said, if you just want to clean this plate and take everything off of this is a slide that's up here right now, you're looking at about $1.2 million if we just clean everything off and you just want to sell that site. He said that's probably not the best and highest land use of that site. We have a couple buildings, there are 2 buildings on this site. Last time I was here, I was talking about the buildings not being in good shape. There are 2 buildings that are relatively good shape. The medical examiner's office, who is going to be moving to their new facility here shortly, and right behind it is a warehouse. that we use for cold storage. At one time, when maintenance was down there, they shared it with us. When they left, we took over that whole building. Those two buildings are in relatively good shape. He said, if you want to take off that 1.96 acres and just sell those two buildings alone, you're looking at a little over 1.3, almost close to $1.4 million. He estimated those two buildings alone are. If you took the rest of that site and not include those two buildings and sold off those buildings 1 through 9 with the buildings there, you're looking possibly at the $2.85 million, $2.3 million range for what you could get for the buildings, besides those two that you already just sold on that last slide. So those are some of the options you have. However, the other option that, we've also discussed is, what happens if we went back to the slide I have right here, kept those two buildings and sold them off at the $1.3, $1.4 million, and raised the rest of that site and cleaned that site off? What could that be redeveloped as? Mr. Phillips talked about, and, he'd be willing to come to the board and discuss this with you, about the highest usage. If you took that land along 17th Street and West Street and redeveloped that land into commercial usage, high-end commercial usage, I looked this up the street from us. There is an AutoZone up the road. It sits like about a half-acre lot. Their property tax, I believe, was about $64,000 a year for that small site. So if you redevelop that along 17th and West Street into some commercials, and then take the rest of that lot behind there and make a residential area, it's impossible to figure the limitations on it. We talked about you could have a green space there, put a big bridge over the top of the railroad tracks, and have that be access right into Marathon Park. So there's a lot of different options out there to do what you want to do with that land. It's a valuable piece of land, but it's something I think this board at some point needs to reconsider.
Sure, I'll say that was the takeaway with, and I'll send that link as well from Mr. Phillips' presentation to HR Finance and Infrastructure. The idea that should the board move forward with relocation of the Wausau Highway facility, the opportunity exists for the board to be strategic about what it wants to accomplish relative to that site. So as Jim said, you could potentially take, a portion of the lot that is on West Street, on 17th, which is, again, high traffic, right? So you would have a specific development for a smaller parcel, like Jim alluded to, a commercial sort of facility. Similar approach on West Street because of its easy access. Mr. Phillips talked about being able to essentially segment off those sections. And again, this was in response to some questions from board members about how could you, if we did relocate, redevelop that site in a way that selfishly, I think for the board, right, it could be used, those proceeds could be used to decrease the impact to the Marathon County taxpayer of the cost of relocation in a new facility. So I'll send that link that has Mr. Phillips' presentation, but that was why staff engaged those services from Mr. Phillips, was in response to that question about, well, what if we look at this differently? It's not only the ongoing tax revenue that would accrue to the county and to the municipality, but perhaps more importantly, how could we, through the sale of those parcels, take those proceeds and put them toward the cost of the facility?
So for the proposed location, it is in Kronewetter. It's on Old 51, which I believe everybody is now aware of. The site is just south of the old Wausau home. Just north of the site is where Wausau Transport used to be. Gander RV now is in that area. If you follow my cursor, there's Wausau RV. There's Wausau Homes. For anybody remember all the homes that used to sit along the pond, that's over here. And across the road from us is, across from home from this site, is Wisconsin Public Service. To the south, there's a park, and to the east, there's a cemetery currently. Currently, this is a little blow-up of the site itself. So what you have forward tonight in the resolution is we have contacted, we have offered a purchase for P1 in the 2 sites from Wisconsin Public Service. We are in contact and working with sites P2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 at this time also, but Tuesday, when you come back, the resolution is just referring to P1. Wisconsin Public Service has 2 sites there. P2, it does have a home on it. P3, 4, and 5 have a home on it. And P6 has I'll refer to as a half a shed. There's a shed and half the roof is fallen into, so that's what's on that site. This is just a quick diagram of showing you the acres. Now, Shad Harvey is online with us, I believe, if anybody wants to talk about zoning. But my understanding, and Chris and Lance have been through this, even though sites P1, the public service sites, and P6 are all zoned B3 at this time for commercial, sites P2, P3, P4, P5, as their zoning reads, is available for utility construction, which we would fall under, my understanding.
Yeah, Shad can take any questions, but the short answer is, and I appreciate Jim teeing that up, the zoning change needed portion of that side, that's not accurate. As Jim said, they are P2, 3, 4, and P5 are zoned residential, but there is no zoning change needed based on the use, the proposed use. I don't know, Mike or Shad, if you guys want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, if I may, I can go ahead if you guys can hear me all right.
We can hear you, Shad. Please go ahead.
All right, so in Cronin-Wetter's zoning code, as well as Marathon County's public utility or public service, which a municipal building or municipal use is actually permitted in all zoning districts. So whether that's a residential district or a commercial district, it is a permitted use. So what a permitted use essentially is it's allowed by right as long as you meet all of the criteria listed in their code for that specific use. So with that being said, yes, it's a lot more convenient when you have one zoning district for an entire site. But in this case, even if a residential property was obtained or whatnot, the highway department would be looked at as a permitted use in that district. The different zoning districts do have different limits, such as like setbacks to the road or certain screening requirements or building sizes. So if they're in different districts, you could end up having, you'd have to lay the site out according to the standards of each district. But the use would be allowed as long as you meet those standards.
Mike, you got anything to add?
I think Shad covered it pretty well.
Okay. Jim, please.
So what we did is we worked with our architect again, saying, well, give us a couple different layouts. Give us a layout if that's all the land we had, or if we started adding bits and pieces to this. So layout number 1 here represents just what's in front of you for this evening's resolution and Tuesday's resolution. Those 3 sites together comes out to 18.22 acres. All 3 of those parcels are undeveloped, so there will be no building demo. Again, no rezoning. Allows to have a couple multiple access points. The drawbacks are, if we're going to build on that piece of land, we have some very tight turning movements. We still have some big trucks. We have some lowboy trucks that we have to move around. We have a lot of blind spots on it. Again, I spoke to finance and infrastructure. One thing it doesn't allow us to do is have any room for basic layout for our projects and material storage. A couple of weeks ago here, we had a lot of water, we had a lot of damage to our highways up on Highway 52. For some reason, Mother Nature loves doing it at night and weekends, when the pits are all closed. We have no place to go get material. It'd be very nice and for us to allow us to have some areas just for safety. You know, we had a couple of those washouts where, you know, a foot deep right on the edge of the road, and we can't fix them until Monday because we can't get in a lot of these pits. By allowing us to have some material there, just for safety purpose alone, it would be, we could get those fixed up on the weekend or when the event happens. There's no room for growth, and we are gonna have some neighbors that may not like the horn beeping when we're backing up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go out and plow snow. It's okay, let's happen if we do layout 2 and we just take everything that's actually zoned, commercial development right now, which would give us this one little extra site down in the corner where I mentioned that there's a shed falling down. Well, that bumps us up to 19.6 acres, 4 parcels, 3 undeveloped. Again, that one is developed, but this has a shed that's pretty much, I haven't been in it myself, but from the road, it doesn't look actually very safe even. Again, we're gonna have blind spots. They're not gonna be as bad as the other one. We have that one building demo. Again, no room for growth in the future. As we know, when they built the highway shop that I'm in right now in 1935, I'm assuming they thought that was the biggest and best that we're ever gonna need. We're sitting here in 2025, I'm thinking, boy, this highway shop is be great for us. Nobody knows what we're gonna be doing in 20 to 30 years from now, what departments, what we're all gonna be doing. It's gonna limit what we can do in the future. You know, maybe we take over another department or start doing more maintenance. Maybe we start doing maintenance for villages or other communities. We'd be unable to do that at that point if we have no thing. Again, we're still gonna have neighbors at this point.
Just a question. We've talked, in length about the potential of having to move the highway shop that's at the end of the runway. Does the 19.1 potential allow for that relocation onto that site? Or I guess the print is so small, I can't tell if that.
All these layouts, to answer your question, all these layouts allow us to close our Mosinee facility, which we know we have to do at sometime. We don't know when sometime is, but the FAA has said that we do need to close that facility sometime, because they changed their guidelines and we're right at the end of the runway, the east-west runway in Mosinee. So we're right at the end of the runway, so we do need to move that. This site in the Cronin-Wetter allows us to close and have one less facility to maintain, one less campus to work on. So Site 3 is about the same as Site 2. The only thing is it purchased that little house that was sitting right up in here, the home that's kind of we build around. Now layout 3 would take that. It would get us up to 20.19 acres. We'd have a couple building demos, still some blind spots. Again, no room for growth. A little bit more room for storage, but not ample room that we would foresee that we need for storage of culverts, gravel, other materials like that we can bring back at night. Right now, one of the issues that we have at night is if we have our trucks and we're finishing up late and we have culverts or something on there we can't leave on a job site, we have nowhere to take them. Allowing us some place to bring that stuff back would be a great advantage. And then layout 4 would be the optimal option, which would give us that whole facility down there. It would give us 24.47 acres. It gives us adequate yard storage so we can store material. So we are ready for emergency operations. Eliminates the blind spots. It gives us great flow through the whole area. It allows the building to be set up. And these are just conceptual drawings. I'm not saying if we go with any one of these options, we're torn into the office needs to be where I showed you tonight. I could probably almost guarantee it's not going to be exactly how it is once we get into the design aspect of it. But it's a good conceptual drawing to show us that this is the foot plan we need this is the amount of square footage that we need, and this is the layout that can happen to allow us to have a facility that allows us growth in the future, allows us a safe working environment, and it allows us material storage so we can do all of our operations in one location. So those are the different layouts that we have. With that, I can take any questions, or if Lance has anything to add?
Just for context on the site that Jim showed you, the West Street site at the top, you know, we're talking about acreage size, and I'm a big fan of context. The current site that we're sitting on is about,
It's about 8.5 acres until we took over some land from cold storage, which we share with the parks, but we need to keep half of that green space, so.
yeah, so we could, if the desire and the options ultimately long-term, stay on the current site and redevelop that in a way that better suits the needs of the highway department to the best of your ability. You have 12 acres, but of the 12, 2 need to be set aside for green space, so you're down to 10. Comparatively then, when we look at the site that we've been talking about, Jim gave you the acreages for each of these layouts. So again, you're at 18.22 at the smallest, all the way up to the top if you get if the board directs us to move forward, we'd work to secure that about 24 and a half. I do want to say, I know a number of you, you all know this, in terms of big facility projects that we've had over the last, certainly during my tenure, I want to be very clear about the commitment we make to work with local municipalities and property owners around. We absolutely sit down and meet. I can tell you with respect to our Lakeview project, I've attended more community meetings, and Chris has attended more community meetings with that neighborhood group, and we've met with, at the time, we met with municipal leaders from the city to talk through what concerns they had. We certainly would make the commitment, and as was said before by Shad about, you know, what does a site plan approval process look like and the setbacks? We have to comply with those things. That's required. We do that. But we go beyond that. Like I said, we've met with adjacent landowners. I can tell you with respect to the Lakeview project, we did make changes. To Jim's point, what was on our conceptual plans initially when we were moving forward, that did change. Absolutely. We listened, and to the extent we could, we accommodated. Make no mistake, anytime you're building something, you've all lived this personally, right? We might not all agree with what our neighbor does on their property all the time, but provided they comply with the requirements in the municipality, they're able to move forward, but we do talk with them a great deal. I want to make that very clear and allay any fears that might exist. So we would absolutely do that in this case if the board decided to move forward. And at the same time, if you decided to move forward with kind of concurrently if you direct us to move forward with the purchase of those parcels that Jim talked about, if you want us to bring more information, and I would assume you would, relative to redevelopment, Mr. Phillips' presentation, I thought was interesting, certainly, and it would allow that strategic conversation, should you want to have it, to try to minimize, which I know is a concern, minimize cost, right? And the funding strategy that was discussed in previous meetings about utilization of existing highway reserve, you could use the funds from the redevelopment or sale of the parcels in West Street to further mitigate that. The other thing that we're already looking to mitigate cost is the 28th Avenue project that you'll be hearing about probably next month. The idea that we had previous plans, long-range plans to make changes to that 28th Avenue corridor. The county acquired a great deal of property in connection with that. The board has said that's no longer our long-term plan. We've been engaging with both the Village of Maine and the City of Wausau. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I'm saying neither of them really want to take on that project themselves or together. So we are going to have the opportunity to divest those parcels. By law, the money that was utilized was from Highway Reserve. It would go back to Highway Reserve, again, be available to you to further mitigate costs. So just wanted to address, I certainly appreciate the public comment and, hey, would the county be engaging with the municipality and the local adjacent landowners? And the answer is yes, absolutely.
Other questions? Supervisor Wilhelm, please.
Are there any permits that you have to get from the Village of Croninwater to build a facility, or is it what we want, what we can do? What we
Mike,
want?
the Corp Counsel will address what he has researched.
Sure. So I don't regularly work with the Village of Croninwater's municipal code, but I did review it in anticipation of this meeting. Really what we're talking about is under the existing zoning of the site, we don't need to pursue a rezone because the permitted use allows for the highway shop as a permitted use in the existing zoning districts. However, it appears that we would be required to go through the site planning process, which the administrator alluded to, which basically requires us to go through and get site plan approval from the village. That's a process that wouldn't begin until we had the parcels and had a site plan to go through that approval process. That involves an interaction with the village's plan commission, and the plan commission reviews the site approval plan against the applicable requirements of its zoning code. So basically, it reviews to make sure whatever our plan is that we're proposing for the site is consistent with their zoning code requirements. There isn't a plan approval portion of that approval process that allows for a look outside of the requirements of the code, but it is another assurance to the village that whatever plan we come up with is consistent with their local zoning code. And that's really the process, as I understand it, to get that site plan approved before we can move forward with construction.
And if I can just elaborate.
Right, please.
We would engage the village. Once you don't go get a site plan and then engage, not only with the village, but also the adjacent landowners. You have your tentative plan, you engage the village. Like Jim said, we would guarantee you that the first draft is not the draft that we actually pursue final site plan approval for. You get that input on the front end, then you go for that site plan approval, but the threshold point that Mike made, we would absolutely have to comply with all of the applicable rules, setbacks and other screening requirements that exist, just like any other person or entity that purchases property. I don't know, Chris, anything you want to add on that? Not to put you on the spot.
Okay, other questions? Supervisor Lemmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. When we had our joint meeting, there was a spreadsheet with some amounts, and there was almost $1 million for grading, excavation, and earthwork for the Croninwater. Does that include testing if there is contamination from the nearby coal plant? And if not, what is the process for making sure we can dig and not have an environmental issue?
So the sites that are in front of you tonight, the public service and the one, we already had REI do a phase one in environmental. So after we have a signed offer to purchase, we have a period of time in there that we can do those environmental reports. We've already done those and got a clear report for those sites.
If I
Go ahead.
If I could add one thing, in my experience, I'm certainly not saying this is absolutely going to be accurate, but the nature of our use of this site is consistent with if there was an environmental issue. It's been my experience, albeit limited, I would certainly turn to people with more who I know are on this board. Oftentimes the direction is to cap, and that is exactly what we would be doing with this site. I mean, for those of you that have been to the highway shop, sorry, Jim, but it's not the most elaborate of sites. It's not the most complex in terms of what it is. It's a lot of asphalt covering a site with buildings on it. This is not a situation that you would expect with residential, perhaps, where you're digging deep into the site to excavate for basements or do things like they're doing in the city of Wausau downtown. So I think that is one of the things moving forward that we would look at. I hope that answers your question.
Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the cost of a new high-capacity well? I know Mr. Griesbach doesn't think that we would need one, but it sounds like the community members disagree. So I'm curious as to what that may cost. And I have another question after that.
We don't have, we did reach out to the village, and the answer we got was they had the capacity. But we can look and have further conversations. We certainly would do that.
From my understanding, just community chatter, they thought they would have capacity if it was a satellite location, not the whole highway department being relocated. So I'm just saying what I'm hearing. I don't know. I'm not in on the meetings, but I'm concerned that if they do want a new well, how much is that going to cost? And if there is indeed a new subdivision going in that would put pressure on their water utility, that's something I think we need to take into consideration. My other question, and maybe you've mentioned this and it went, whew, so that's why I'm asking again, is the other parcels. So the P2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, what's been done? You probably mentioned it and I missed it, I'm sorry. For contacting those landowners if what we really want to do is have all of those parcels. That's the goal, right? So what has been done so far with those landowners?
I would just say everything Jim's going to say is consistent with the direction we've gotten from the committees.
So, yeah, we were directed by the committee some time ago to pursue the whole site. Everything comes back to full board for approval. So, again, the sites, P1 and the two public service ones, we have signed offers to purchase. The sites along the bottom, we have an offer to purchase in their hands. And matter of fact, even the other top site, as of yesterday, I believe, they should have it. They don't have an offer to purchase. I believe they have that one as of yesterday. So all the other sites do have offer to purchases out there. And if I can just step back one quick one to the water question. I mean, I guess I'm somewhat confused if it's our main shop or if it's our satellite shop. If we told them the water usage was 800 to 900,000 gallons, it really doesn't matter if it's our main shop. That's our usage. So again, they know our usage. If it would be a satellite or a main shop, it shouldn't matter. Usage is usage.
Supervisor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Chair. One question I have would be, is there any way to get preliminary approval on a plan before we would vote on spending $750,000, $800,000 on property we may not get approval on? I have a follow-up.
I'll have Corp Counsel address that.
In short, not that I'm aware of, really developing that plan would be the step to take after you've acquired the property and kind of gone through those preliminary stages on your end. So I'm not aware of a method to get that kind of preliminary approval.
Administrator Leonard?
Just building on that, just like any offer to purchase we all make on a house, right? There's a time limit. The offers to purchase are limited in terms of their time, and they would expire before your, what month is it? The May meeting. Again, I think it's important to note that with respect to the site plan approval is limited to application of existing ordinances. And we would comply with all those. That is a requirement for any person or entity purchasing a piece of property. So if that enters into your calculus. The other piece with the property, I know there has been a question, oh, this is a lot of money to spend, and I'll just tell you, worst case scenario, right, walking that down, if once we do architectural work and have plans to move forward with a site plan, and it, for whatever reason, truly doesn't move forward, the answer, the recommendation I would make to you, the best course of action at that time is turn around and sell it. WPS has those parcels have the 2 WPS parcels have not been on the market for any development. The one requirement they put in as a covenant in their offer was they can't be used for residential. That's consistent with what the Village of Cronewetter has said is their long-term plan. They don't want residential there, as was alluded to in public comment. So you'd turn around and attempt to divest those parcels and develop them directly. And I would hope in partnership with Cronewetter in a way that was both beneficial to them and as beneficial as possible to the county. But that's what I would recommend you do. I'm not aware, like Corp Counsel indicated, that seeking site plan approval before you own the property is just not something I'm familiar with. I would again defer to people with more economic development background in the room than me, but that's just not been the way that I've seen that move forward in the past.
Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So initially, going back, I've been on infrastructure for several years. It was kind of the thought and pushing Commissioner Griesbach a lot about let's fix what we have now. And after taking a tour of Eau Claire and then taking a tour of our site, it is very clear that what we have here in Wausau is not worth doing anything with. So moving forward with a site, whatever that site is imperative. We have this site that we've talked about for a long time. And I appreciate the persons from Cronewetter coming to speak. And so, just like it's been said before, whatever we can work out to move forward, I think is the best thing. And certainly, as a county, we don't want to, as others have said, and we hear often, we don't want to impose ourselves upon local municipalities. So I appreciate those comments. What's before us is those 3 sites. The other sites, we can kind of see where that's going to go from here. But I really believe that this is something that needs to be done. And had conversation with some, the highway department hasn't been redone in 30 some odd years. And the current site has been in existence for some 80 years. At some point, you have to say, when do we update our facilities? When do you move forward? When do you start something fresh? And I think this is the time. I think this is the spot. And all the other kind of pieces, I think all of that can be worked out. Thank you.
Supervisor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you had mentioned the storage of materials for responding to emergencies. And I know there's the satellite facilities along Highway 29 at Hatley, and I'm not sure how many other you have, but is that a possibility to use those for storage of those gravel to have on hand?
The only facility we have is our Hatley site. That one, where there's no room out there. It's right on, literally on the edge of the swamp. And the other thing you have is, besides, we have no storage. In the summer, we don't have any loaders out there to load equipment. So we'd have to take equipment out there again, plus we have no room out there the way it is. We've been using a product for solar salt for the brine, makes it much more efficient. We had one small shed out there, and we kind of got that saved for that right now. And that shed holds about 500 tons, so there is no room out at that site, and the Mosinee site would be going away.
So would the Hatley site also be going away?
No, the Hatley site will remain. That was built in about the mid-90s, and that serves our far east of Marathon County.
Supervisor Sandalski, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question, like our current facility. Do you know, as far as like a value on that, if we would pursue trying to sell that, get it back on the tax rolls, do you know what kind of value, as maybe we could possibly put that towards the new facility?
Sure, absolutely. So going back to the first couple slides of the presentation, we asked a lot of Mr. Phillips, who we, again, based on some questions that were asked by board members. So the slide on page 90 of your packet, he did a number of things for us. He said, what if you just had a vacant site, 12 acres, vacant site, came out to about 100,000 an acre. So that's the 1.2 million. That assumes you either get rid of all the buildings or there were no buildings on there ever, which is not accurate, right? Because we do have buildings. So the next thing he did, again, we asked him, very pointed, just to your point, how could we develop the site? What would be advantageous to, again, generate revenue to offset the cost of a relocation? And he identified, as Jim alluded to, there's really two buildings that are in better condition than, substantially better condition than the rest. And those are where our current medical examiner's office is located on West Street, and then a warehouse, it's noted on here as a warehouse behind it. So Mr. Phillips parceled that off, and he said if you kept as is those two buildings, you'd be looking at, just for those two, about 1.38 million, based on his professional opinion. And then he looked at the remaining buildings, which they're 1 through 9, they're listed on here. Those are really more the highway buildings. So if you take off the medical examiner and warehouse building, you'd be left with the highway buildings. What could you reasonably expect to sell those for? And that's that 2.285. So adding those things together, not great at math on the fly, but you're about $3.6 million. But, and I will send you all the presentation, I think the interesting thing he brought up was, really, if you were going to be strategic about it, you'd further subdivide that parcel. You would take along 17th, a narrow strip along 17th, to, like Jim's point, if you think about that area where there's O'Reilly Auto Parts, that is a good frontage. And then you'd maybe do a similar thing along West Street, narrow strip there because you have direct access. It's much more amenable, and I'm not trying to put words in Mr. Phillips' mouth, he's not here, but my characterization of his comments, you'd have a different type of development. You might have more retail or commercial along the streets, 17th and West, and then behind that is a better opportunity for a different type of use, perhaps housing. If you were to be more strategic, simply put, he said, significantly more than the 3.6. So if that's a direction the board wants to go, my recommendation would be to truly engage in that process of being strategic once we start that relocation process, because that is going to take time. Design, first of all, is going to take a year, and then construction is similar, 18 months. So you have time to go through that process. But I think it was Supervisor Marshall asked that question, hey, what could we do differently? Rather than have the West Side Master Plan that Jim alluded to that was re-upped in, I want to say, 2019, 2020, that had a park and recreation use, specifically ice sheets were relocated there. Do something else. What if you redeveloped it to offset costs of relocation? So I'll send that presentation from Mr. Phillips with substantially more than the 3.6.
Could we put that like in a provision as pursuing that after, I mean, not in time, not right now, but I'm saying if we get this new highway department built and everything moved over, that we could put that in a provision for buying this property to pursuant to resale of that, of the existing property downtown there?
I think, let me reflect back what I think you're saying. Could you essentially utilize the proceeds from the redevelopment, the sale, to offset the cost of construction?
Yeah, construction, but I'm just saying, can we put that in a provision on this?
Oh, on the resolution.
On the resolution.
I'd ask Mike to weigh in on that.
It's a good question. The reason I'm hesitating is because the two things are so separate in time. The initial purchase of the parcels, which is what you're dealing with, the purchase of P1 and the 2 WPS parcels is a right now thing, whereas the redevelopment and the proceeds that would come from that are 2 years, multiple years down the road. So I'd have to think about how we would word that, and whether it would go into this resolution versus the resolution that you'd have to pass to sell and change those parcels.
I think the one point that was made earlier, though, was the highway funds were used to build the facilities. And the sale would have to go back into the highway fund at sale.
I think you could reference in a new whereas clause where you kind of walk through the thought process that the board is considering. That isn't a binding piece of the now therefore be it resolved, but at least it reflects what the board's thought process was. So I think there is some room for that in this resolution.
Thank you. Other discussion? Other discussion? All right, moving on from item number 9B, 5A, a resolution in support of continuation of the availability of tax-exempt bonding for municipalities. Resolution R-26-25. Any questions? Okay, we're down to item number 10, announcements and/or requests. I've got a couple of announcements for the board. Earlier this week, the clerk sent out a save the date notification for an additional county board and, in this case, city council meeting for Monday, May 19th at 6:30 p.m. For the sole purpose of receiving the Homelessness Task Force report. And that will be at 6:30 p.m. on the 19th. That's tentatively. We'll have more details to come as to we're looking at potentially here or potentially down at the Lakeview campus. The other item is there may be an additional item on the board agenda that the HR Finance Committee will be taking up on Tuesday. And it deals with a provision in providing that and background on the necessity for end-of-year budget amendments. That will be potentially forwarded to the board for its consideration if the HR Finance Committee moves that forward. Anything else for announcements and/or requests? Okay, the only other one that I have is I wish everyone a very happy Easter to all and enjoy the Easter vacation if you're allowed to take off. With that, we're down to item number 11. What is your pleasure? Supervisor Kroll with the motion, Supervisor Marash with the second. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.